Hi, everyone. Welcome. We are happy to be here and excited to present a topic that means so much to us. Thank you for being here. Before we share our agenda, let's start with who we are. So I am Süheyla Sarışahin. I was born in Turkey. I had my K-12 and undergraduate education in Turkey. After I graduated and I had my bachelor's degree in English language learning, I moved to Africa. I taught English as a second language in West Africa for 2 years. Then I moved to Bay Area, Oakland, and then I am here in Las Vegas. I have been teaching in the United States for about 9 years at middle and high school levels. And in 2018, I started my PhD journey. Before that, I had my master's in English language learning, and I had my PhD in special education. Currently, I am a visiting assistant professor at UNLV. And today I chose to be part of this webinar because it is personal to me as an educator. When I worked as a teacher, I witnessed the lack of support for emergent bilinguals and the lack of teacher preparation because teachers faced many challenges on how to support the language needs of emergent bilinguals. And emergent bilinguals were mostly in sink or swim situation. That's how I decided to continue in higher education and be where I am today, right now. So specifically, my research was focusing on the academic language development of emergent bilinguals with and without disabilities. I have been teaching at UNLV for about four years at the Department of Early Childhood, Multilingual and Special Education. I have been teaching TESOL and special education courses. And today I am excited and ready to be here and to present a topic that is important for me. Now let's get to know who is Dr. Karkova Falomir.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our presentation. My name is Gloria Karkova Falomir. I was born in Mexico, so my first language or my native language is Spanish. I had my K-12 education and undergraduate education in Mexico. I moved to the US in 2009, and I had my graduate students at UNLV, my master's and doctorate program on special education, and my doctorate program with a leadership area in bilingualism. I have experience in working with K-12 grades and post-secondary education. I also worked for 2 federal funded grants during my doctorate program. I worked as a project coordinator for Project E3 at the beginning of my doctorate program, which was specializing in enhancing and engaging and empowering teachers for the next generation of English learners. And then I also worked at the end of my doctorate program for a roots replication of a tier 2 kindergarten mathematics intervention in collaboration with the University of Oregon. Currently, I'm a visiting assistant professor at UNLV at the Department of Early Childhood, Multilingual and Special Education, and my research interest focus on supporting the instruction, performance, and achievement of students with learning disabilities, as well as students who are emerging bilinguals with and without disabilities, especially in the area of mathematics. The opportunity to be here is really important to me. It's really personal. I moved to the United States in 2009, and I brought with me 3 kids, 1 in kindergarten and 2 in elementary school that became emergent bilinguals and started receiving English language services when I arrived. And I had no idea on the educational system in the United States and how to advocate for my own kids. So that made me realize that I wanted to do way more for parents that felt the same way I felt, that feel the same way I felt, and for students that felt like my kids. So that's why this topic and this area of study is really, really important to me, and I feel very passionate about it. Now that you know a little bit more about ourselves, let's begin with the agenda for this presentation. Okay, first, the main purpose of this webinar is to bring awareness about the education of emerging bilinguals. We will start by defining who are emerging bilingual students, current statistics of this student population, and then the overall academic performance. Next, we will talk about the annual language proficiency assessment of emerging bilinguals, which for this state is the WIDA assessment, and important instructional support in all content areas for emerging bilinguals. And then we will conclude our presentation by defining cultural and linguistic sustaining pedagogy and providing information in equity and advocacy related to emerging bilinguals and their families. Now, Dr. Shari Sahin is going to get us started.
So here we go. As you all know, the diversity of the general population in the United States has been tremendously increasing currently. Let's look at some of the statistics related to that. So as current data from U.S. Census Bureau in 2018 shows that it includes United States population, includes a variety of race, ethnicities, culture, and Nevada's population followed the similar pattern with United States population. And all of those differences bring also linguistic diversity, which is reflected in our education system. So having a diverse society means having a variety of family structures, such as education, religion, ethnicity, race, culture, opportunity, geographic location, and primary language. All those structures will consequently have an impact in the education of all students. But for the purpose of this webinar, we will talk specifically about emergent bilinguals. So let's start with defining who are emergent bilingual students. Emergent bilinguals are students who demonstrate emergent abilities in speaking, writing, and listening. Emergent bilinguals might come to school with developed oral or literacy practices in their home languages that enable them to communicate with their families and communities. So we specifically want to emphasize an asset-based perspective when we refer to emergent bilinguals. Asset-based perspective takes high priority for us. But first, we want to stress the role of language in emergent bilinguals education. And then we will talk about asset-based perspective and culturally and linguistically sustaining a pedagogy. Let's first remember the current statistic of emergent bilingual student population. So the population of public school students in the United States who are emergent bilinguals increased from 3.8 million to 5.1 million students in 2019, which is approximately 11% of the whole student population. And it is also predicted that approximately 40% of students will come from non-English speaking homes by 2030. So as current data show, you can tell that the majority of emergent bilinguals, like 76% of them, are Hispanic, followed by Asian, white, and Black emergent bilingual students. And as a result of this, consequently, the majority of emergent bilinguals speak Spanish at home, followed by Arabic, English, Chinese, and Vietnamese. And as a side note, English as a home language for emergent bilinguals represent those students who live in multilingual households, like if one of the parents are native English speaker. Now let's see emergent bilingual public school student population across the United States, as that map from 2019 data shows that the top 4 states with the most emergent bilinguals are Texas, California, New Mexico, and Nevada. Now let's specifically talk about emergent bilinguals in Nevada and Clark County School District. In current school year, there are 13.5 emergent bilinguals in Nevada, and 15% of all students in Clay County School District are emergent bilinguals. So emergent bilinguals in Nevada follow a similar pattern with the whole emergent bilinguals in the United States, as most of them speak Spanish. And to provide some insights to the academic performance of emergent bilinguals, let's see the current reading and math average scores in Nevada as of 2022. So as you can see, emergent bilinguals are below basic compared to non-emergent bilinguals who are above basic in fourth grade reading and math scores. And emergent bilinguals achievement follow similar pattern to the academic achievement of emergent bilinguals across all states in the United States. And the need of improvement in the field of emergent bilinguals across the nation is also reflected in their graduation rate, high school graduation rates. So all of these achievement scores and graduation rate data show that preparing all teachers, general education specialists, electives, all teachers with an asset-based perspective and culturally, linguistically sustaining pedagogy is essential to support both languages and content development of emergent bilinguals so that their academic achievement can increase.
Great. Now, to complement the information we previously presented, we need to provide information about how this population of students are being identified to receive English language services here in the US and in the state of Nevada. So let's start by talking about the law. So by law, all emergent bilinguals' English language proficiency must be evaluated upon their school enrollment. The states hold schools accountable for annual measurable achievement objectives. In Nevada, identification on emergent bilinguals includes a home language survey. To decide their eligibility for English language services, if students speak other languages that differ from English at home, they need to be tested through a WIDA screening assessment. Now, we already mentioned WIDA before. So what is the WIDA assessment? So the WIDA assessment is a member-based, or first the WIDA in general. The WIDA is a member-based organization dedicated to research, design, and implementation of high-quality standards-based system for students who are in kindergarten to 12th grade. It's emergent bilinguals. The WIDA assessment is being implemented for identification, placement, and progress monitoring purposes in 41 states in the United States, in which Nevada is included. WIDA access is given annually by law to emergent bilinguals in kindergarten to 12th grade to monitor their English proficiency levels in academic contexts. Now, let's talk a little bit more about the assessment, the WIDA assessment, and how can we interpret their results. So the WIDA assessment evaluates the 4 language domains that are listening, speaking, reading, and writing of English, and each state has different cut scores to reclassify emergent bilingual students as English proficient. So they are no longer eligible for English language services. In Nevada, emergent bilinguals are expected to achieve a score of 4.5 out of 6, and this was implemented since 2017 in the WIDA screener assessment. And you guys can have more information about how to interpret results in the WIDA website. Now, let's talk a little bit more about different levels of English language proficiency that will be reflected in the results for the WIDA assessment. So the first English language proficiency as a level is entering. And then we have beginning. Students go through all these levels: beginning, developing, expanding, bridging, and the last level is reaching, in which students, emergent bilinguals, are now identified as being English language proficient. Very good. Now, WIDA provides performance definitions to interpret and understand the results of the English language proficiency assessment across 4 language domains for all grade levels and all English proficiency levels. Presented in this slide is the overview for all grade levels in listening and reading language domains. And in this other slide, we can find the overview for all grade levels in speaking, in the domains of speaking and writing. More information can be found also in the WIDA website. It's really important to understand all the specification on characteristics of each proficiency level and definitions on skills and abilities pertaining to English that emerging bilinguals have to be able to accommodate them and to support them during instruction. Very good. Now, talking about instruction, now we will talk about English language development standards, also designed and created by the WIDA Consortium to support the language and development of emerging bilingual students in all content areas or across all content areas. Standards encompass opportunities for multilingual learners to develop language for social and instructional purposes, which is not the same at the all language proficiency levels and all grade levels and in all content areas. It's important that we understand that language is a part of the entire school day of emerging bilingual students and all students, and all educators share responsibility for engaging multilingual learners in rich opportunities to simultaneously learn content and language. This is important because the academic language required to succeed in school is not the same as the language students use for social purposes. So we will talk a little bit more about what is academic language and what is the language needed for students to succeed in the classroom. But before that, I wanted to stress that language is embedded, as we said, all teachers are language teachers, and language is embedded in all content standards. For example, here we have mathematics in the language of mathematics and the mathematics common core content standard for first grade, and the content is addition with the number 100, but these standards, as many others, include language functions and language standards objectives that students should meet to communicate the reasoning and understanding of the content. So all content standards include language standards also. Very good. Now we're going to talk about academic language, and as I mentioned before, is the language that students need to succeed academically, which is not the same that students use for social purposes. So what is exactly academic language? Academic language is not academic vocabulary. Let's make that clear. Academic language is way more than academic vocabulary. It encompasses 3 levels. The word level, which is academic vocabulary and colloquial expressions, specialized and technical content words, and nominalization. But it also includes 2 other levels. The sentence levels, which is type of sentences, grammatical structures, word order, verbs, phrasal verbs, and the discourse level, which includes different text types and genres, and the coherence of ideas. Very good. So therefore, during instruction and assessment, language supports are essential for emerging bilingual students. Now, before we move to our next slide, I want to stress that learning academic language requires from teachers to be systematic, deliberate, prolonged, and robust. They need to use this type of approach to be able to support their students and for students to be able to acquire the academic language to succeed in school. Very good. So now that we have talked about what is the language that students need to succeed at school, now we're going to talk about the supports they need to acquire that language.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yes, an important aspect in the education of emergent bilinguals is the language supports they must receive during their instruction and assessment to get an equitable education. So we don't want our emergent bilinguals to be in sink or swim situation, as most of the emergent bilinguals receive their education in general education classrooms. All of the teachers, besides ESL teachers, ESL coordinators, all of the teachers need to plan for their language objectives in their lesson plans that aligns with their content objectives. So it is going to help to promote equitable practices for emergent bilinguals. So language objectives are based on different key uses of language and language functions. It helps students to show mastery of content objectives by using language with different language modalities. So when teachers prepare their lesson plans with content objectives, they need to align their language objectives based on the VIDA levels of emergent bilingual students. So after preparing those, teachers need to intentionally plan and implement supports based on emergent bilinguals language proficiency levels, VIDA levels. So to provide equitable opportunities to all students to develop their academic language and content knowledge simultaneously, teachers must include scaffolded supports in their practices. And scaffolding is an instructional strategy that provides emergent bilinguals an appropriate level of support. It's not permanent support. It should be gradually removed as their English proficiency levels increase. And to give some examples related to supports for emergent bilinguals, teachers can use sensory supports such as real-life objects, realia, manipulatives, pictures, videos, models, figures, drawings. And they can also use graphic supports such as charts, graphic organizers, graphs, timelines, KWL charts. And they can also use interactive supports to provide them opportunity to use the language, such as providing them partner activities, group activities, whole group discussions using cooperative structures, and also allowing them to use their native language. And those supports for emergent bilinguals can be specifically used in specific content areas. For example, to support the language of language arts, teachers can use illustrated words, word walls, posters, displays, audiobooks, songs. And to support the language of mathematics, they can use blocks, cubes, calculators, rulers, compasses, and coins. And to support the language of science, they can use scientific instruments, measurement tools, posters, illustrations of processes or cycles. And to support the language of social studies, they can use maps, atlases, compasses, timelines, and video clips. So in general, those scaffolding strategies suggested to be used to support the language needs of emergent bilinguals. And again, depending on their English language proficiency level, scaffolding supports should be provided when needed and removed when students' language proficiency level increase. For example, let's say we have VIDA level 1 to entering beginning level of emergent bilingual. We can provide visuals, realia, modeling, gestures, and L1 use of first language. which is going to help them to understand the content and also to develop the language, both academic language and content simultaneously, but at higher levels when they are close to be proficient. Some supports could be removed and replaced with other activities and other supports, but all of those are essential, again, to help them with their language development and to make the content meaningful and reachable to them.
In addition to providing instructional supports, an asset-based perspective that provides equitable education for all students in the classroom requires a culturally and linguistically sustaining pedagogy from teachers and administrators. And it is very important to see and recognize that students bring lots of assets to the classroom. So how can we have an asset-based perspective? By seeing language diversity as a resource, and we all educators should recognize the benefits of the linguistic diversity and bilingualism for all students. Then clarify common misconceptions about learning a second language. There's a common misconception that students should not be learning or speaking another their first or native language if they are learning English. That is totally wrong and not backed up with research. Students can and should learn a native their first language and English simultaneously. Educators, and we all should also understand the role of the native language development in school achievement, which is important. And to make the education of emerging bilingual students the responsibility of all teachers. So we are all in this together, and also we're all language teachers, no matter where students are in or out of school. We're all stakeholders are responsible for their education. Very good. So let's keep talking about an asset-based perspective. And besides language, what else can we talk about that it involves an asset-based perspective? And let's talk about culture, which is very important. So seeing cultural differences as strengths. Educators and all stakeholders should understand, we must understand that and recognize that students and families' funds of knowledge and cultural capital that our students, our families bring to the classroom are very important and make our instruction richer. So what is exactly funds of knowledge? Well, funds of knowledge is a very common term that we use in when we talk about emerging bilingual students. And then it's all the skills and knowledge students acquire at home through experience with their families and within their communities. And also the cultural capital is all that cultural background, knowledge, dispositions, skills that that students learn and they are passed through generation through another generation. So all that knowledge, all that that students and families bring to the classroom, we as educators need to leverage that and have opportunities to include all that in our classroom to make our instruction richer and our students aware that we value their culture and their first language. A cultural sustaining pedagogy can improve the learning and academic achievement of emerging bilinguals. Very good. Let's keep talking and let's say, what is a cultural competence and what do we mean about having a cultural competence? So first, we need a self-awareness of our own culture, limits, values, and assumptions. And then we also need an awareness of our students' cultures, their perspectives, beliefs, and behaviors that differ from our own. And then we must find the perspectives that overlap and develop a strategy to incorporate all of our students and our own cultures during our instruction and during in our teaching and assessment practices. Very good. Now, just to summarize what a cultural linguistic sustaining pedagogy is and how we as teachers can support our students and include it in our classroom. We need to use culture as a basis for student learning, connect classroom and schools to families and the community, and make families feel embraced during our instruction and our practices. Recognize the importance of culture, and that we all have one, and that our culture shapes the way we teach and the way we behave and the beliefs that we have. So we that must be reflected in our instructional practices. Ensure that all emerging bilinguals feel significant and cared for in the classroom, and not only emerging bilinguals but their families. Very good. So, there's a specific topic that we should not let behind when we talk about emerging bilinguals, and that it's very close to my heart, that it's advocacy. When talking about emerging bilinguals, an asset-based perspective will include advocacy efforts in every conversation. So what does it mean to advocate for emerging bilinguals? As I told you before, I did not know how to advocate for my own kids, and I did not have the knowledge on the educational system here in the United States, which is very different than the educational system I grew up in Mexico. So all that I needed help from teachers, and I needed guidance. So how can we support and how can we advocate for emerging bilingual students? Working for emerging bilinguals, equitable and excellent education by taking appropriate actions in their behalf. And that in this, I am really, really stressing having the highest expectations for our emerging bilingual students. The same as any other students, they will achieve as high as we expect them to be, and by giving them all the supports that we mentioned before. So let's have those highest expectations and take appropriate actions, like stepping in and providing a voice for emerging bilinguals and their families who have not yet developed their own strong voice, but they will. So they just need a little support while they develop their own advocacy skills and develop their voice to advocate for their own children and for their own education. Collaborating with other teachers and administrators and sharing responsibility to promote equitable teaching practices for emerging bilinguals. And this is important, very important. We said that we all are language teachers, and collaboration is key for the education of emerging bilinguals. This is a common effort that must be done in collaboration with everyone in every stakeholder in the school community, not only educators, teachers, but administrators and parents, and also the community that it's involved around that school. Let's raise awareness of how to change the school climate and the school culture to embrace emerging bilinguals and their families, and also help families how to better advocate for themselves and for their kids' education, and also on how to participate and feel and engage in activities that teachers might promote, or that teachers will include during their instruction. So specifically, what type of ideas can we give to to the parents of emerging bilingual students? Let's look for ways on that emerging bilingual parents can help with children's schoolwork or participate in volunteer at work. Then let's also consider alternative schedules, locations. This is important because not all parents can meet the same schedule and times that we have at our schools. So sometimes we just need to go above and beyond to be able to accommodate parents. Encourage emerging bilingual parents to take leadership roles, and we must sometimes just take a step back and let parents lead, and we just support them. They will for short do a great job in this, and also create welcoming environments and design and enhance workshops specifically designed for parents of emerging bilinguals, or that include specific topics that are relevant to the to families and parents of emerging bilinguals, like reading, how to support their kids in homework with their homework, and also provide some resources during those workshops so they can attend. By law, we know that we need to provide an interpreter when needed and to translate forms. But let's go a little bit more beyond, above and beyond just the translation of forms, and give some support to parents about the content included in those forms. What do they know what it's required from them? Do they need an extra hand on the information that they need to provide to the school and that it's needed for the education of their kids, so they can take full advantage of opportunities that are offered to them? So it's something that it does not take too much for teachers and administrators and everyone to do, and it's a great help for parents. And lastly, how to implement home visits and home visits, virtual visits, any type of visit that we can, so parents feel embraced and feel important. It will have great consequences in the education of our students, our emerging bilinguals, and which are their children. Very good. So lastly, we're concluding our webinar on emerging bilinguals. We strive to give you an overall perspective on emerging bilinguals current education, on how to provide multiple instructional supports to increase their academic achievement, focus on an asset-based perspective that includes language and culture as student strengths. We want to stress that all stakeholders involved in the education of emerging bilingual must not only change their teaching and assessment practices, but also advocate for their emerging bilingual students and their families. Thank you for being with us today, and we're ready for your question. Muchas gracias.
Teşekkürler. Now, to ask your questions, you may use Q&A box, or you can raise your hand and ask your questions verbally. Any questions?
Thank you for the presentation. Is really good, and it helped me a lot to clarify my my area when I want to work. So when can I go to solicit a job as a emergent bilingual teacher? I'm a student of the master in special education in UNLV, also student of arts in Hispanic studies. So I don't know what is the process. That's my question. Thank you.
Okay, so let me paraphrase the question so I can answer it the correct way. So you're a master's student and you want to apply to teach to support emerging bilingual students. Is that correct?
That's correct, doctor.
Perfect. So when you finish your master education, and then you have all the requirements from the state to get a license to teach for emerging bilingual students, you just go to the website and submit your application to teach in Clark County School District.
Yes, I am. My area in the master is learning disabilities, because I don't know nothing about emergent bilingual students. So what can I do?
So your master area, it's about learning disabilities. So is there a way for you to include during your master's education or here at UNLV some classes, the ELAT endorsement that will give you the opportunity to support and the knowledge that must begin to teach and support emerging bilingual students. All emerging bilingual students are in general and special education classroom. So you will be teaching emerging bilingual students once you're a teacher at the Clark County School District.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Now let's check the questions in the Q&A box. I have been a classroom teacher and a disability specialist. I have seen some confusion of an English as a second language student being identified as a student with a disability. How can we not confuse the two? Yes, Veronica, this is a good question. This was my starting point when I started my PhD journey, because unfortunately, when I was working as a teacher, I have seen many students who are in special education. At the same time, they are emergent bilinguals, but teachers are not aware of that. They just only focus on disability, and they don't do anything to support their language development because they don't know that the student has a both. And sometimes, yeah, as you said, it can be a confusion. Maybe a student is in a process of language learning, especially early elementary, right? If they don't have English, if they are at VIDA level 1 and 2, teachers may assume that that student has some disability. That's where I think language supports are essential. So supporting the development of language development of the student with some strategies, with some scaffolding supports, or if possible, using first language to see if it is a language issue. If not, it may be then disability related interventions can be done too. But yeah, there are lots of confusion. Either students are emergent bilinguals are overrepresented or underrepresented in some of the special education services. So there are also current research also focus on that, how to identify if it is one or if it is both, because sometimes it can be both, sometimes it can be either one. Gloria, do you want to add something?
No, very good. So let's move forward with our next question. And it's, what specific policies are in place in Nevada? Well, Nevada follows the federal law. So policies for emerging bilinguals under the No Child Left Behind Title III, which is for English limited proficiency in English, follow the law that all students must be identified upon enrollment, and by ESSA, each state must have standardized procedures for entering and receiving English language services, and to exit and stop receiving English language services because students became English proficient. Also, a student must be taught through standards, English language proficiency standards that are in accordance with the with Common Core state standards or with its state content standards. Some states do not use the Common Core, but they have their own rigorous standards, and those standards need to be in accordance with the English proficiency standards. The one similar to the with the standards that we showed in our presentation. Also, it's by law, like federal law, students after exiting the program must be monitored for after they exited and they are English, they are identified as English proficient. They must be monitored for 2 years. Minimum 2 years after they exited the English receiving English language services for the state to check if they are doing the expected academic progress, or they were exited before they were ready and they were not English proficient. So the No Child Left Behind and ESSA stipulations require all students to be identified. All students that have that home survey and they speak other languages that differ from English at home must do a home survey and be assessed through a WIT assessment or other type of assessment that assesses the 4 domains of English language proficiency.
Mm-hmm. There's one more question. What resources does UNLV have for emerging language college students needing writing skills? So I know that there is a writing center which helps to all of the students at UNLV. Besides that, in College of Education in our department, there is a writing group that they meet monthly to provide feedback to each other, student academic authors, the club's name is. But maybe each department offers different opportunities, but this is the only one I know in our department.
But we encourage all teachers at UNLV to support their emerging bilinguals or their students whose first language is not English. Maybe they can, we already presented some supports, very easy supports as like visuals or including their first language or some extra videos or graphic organizers that can support their post-secondary students and on how to thrive academically at UNLV. So as easy as including more visual videos, different language domains during their instruction, requiring students to speak, write, read, use all language domains in English, and also give graphic organizers or the types of support to their students are very good supports to give to your emerging bilingual students, even in post-secondary education, will appreciate it and will thrive academically, or at least will improve their understanding of English.
I think in addition to that, asking for specific feedback from the instructors may help emergent bilinguals at college level too regarding writing skills.
I have a comment, kind of a question too. So I think, we can all agree on the strategies for emergent bilingual learners and multilingual learners at the general level. I think this is very good, but I feel like, we need to see more particular examples. For example, how are these strategies going to look like in, let's say, 5th grade science class? So basically, we need to see much more how this is going to work in an 8th grade math class. So we need to see those particular examples. And I feel like at UNLV, maybe we need to, coordinate our methods classes that, for example, if you are creating one assignment for science class, so you can also, that assignment can be, modified for this English language learners methods class in a way that like you can see all these things coming together. I feel like maybe our methods and our assignments, kind of like separated from each other. We need to do more in terms of integrating how this is going to work out. And the other final thing is, I feel like these strategies are kind of like not just for multilingual learners. When you do these strategies, they are good for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly, and as research says, a good strategy, if it works for monolingual students, will work for English emerging bilingual students, and vice versa. So yeah, those strategies, we all can take full advantage of them, and we all can take leverage. And I totally agree with you about collaborating, not only in K-12 educational settings, but in post-secondary. There's only one bilingual student that needs to meet the requirements of these different content areas, or these different areas that require that can be. We can work with other teachers to make their understanding of the content in multiple areas more effectively, or make them work less in certain areas to be able to achieve academically to have a higher academic achievement. So yeah, totally agree. It's not only a K-12 settings which require the collaboration of teachers and stakeholders. I completely agree that in post-secondary education, it's needed, because we want those students to graduate and to thrive after graduation. So I completely agree.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Deniz, for your question and feedback. I agree. In our TESOL courses at UNLV, we teach methods and assessment courses in TESOL and talk about how content can be used when supporting students' language, but collaborating with other departments on method courses, specifically considering emergent bilinguals, would be amazing to prepare teachers. Now we have more questions on our Q&A box. Let's see, what do we have? Do you know if there is a psychological evaluation to test for learning disabilities in the student's first language in Las Vegas area? For example, in Spanish. Do you know any, Dr. Karkova? Is there any test in Spanish to evaluate their
students for learning disabilities? I believe there are many identification assessment for specific learning disabilities that have their version in Spanish. What I really don't know is schools have the resources to assess students for receiving special education services in their first language. For what I understand, some schools might have it, but it might be not the general rule for all Clark County School District schools. So I'm sorry, I don't have that information.
Yeah, I know students are being evaluated in their first language at early elementary levels, but I also don't know any specific example that is being used currently at CCSD. And let's continue with our next question. How can we best help emergent bilingual students in asynchronous online education? I think it depends on what grade level or language proficiency they are, but still there are a lot of online resources and tools to support their language development as well. Some of the websites, and if Spanish is the first language, for example, providing them with cognates. Online, there are lots of websites that includes hundreds of cognates between English and Spanish, and providing some applications, some games, and online tools.
And also involving parents as much as you can, and they let you to. It's important when kids are at home. We need the participation and the support from parents. So having an open attitude and asking parents to support us on during instruction, having some conversations with their kids, supporting their oral language, especially their oral language development at home while kids are not coming to school.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And as we have 4 minutes left, there is one more question. How does Nevada fare compared to other states in supporting emergent bilinguals? So, you know that we have an increasing number of emergent bilinguals in Nevada, and compared to other states, we are still developing policies and preparing teachers to support our emergent bilinguals more efficiently, and it's maybe also related to funding we have for emergent bilinguals, which is very limited compared to Texas, Florida, the other states with the most emergent bilinguals. So,
but let's talk about something positive. Nevada is requiring teachers to have an ELAT endorsement and supporting, at least at UNLV, some teachers to get their master's degree on English language. On English language development, and Nevada is trying hard to support their teachers and prepare teachers on how to support emerging bilingual students. And then it's starting at least one elementary school. It's starting with its bilingual program. So we're moving towards change takes time, but teachers are being prepared. And not only that, when we prepare teachers, we're supporting them in their knowledge so they can share this knowledge and collaborate with other teachers, so it becomes something bigger than only their emerging bilingual students in their own classroom. So we're hoping for a better future for the emerging bilingual students in the state of Nevada.
Developing, yes. Okay, thank you everyone again for taking your time and participating in our webinar. It was an honor for us to present the information and experience we have in that field. You can always reach out to us.
Unfortunately, we couldn't. We had a limited time to be able, like Dr. Denise said, to give you an full example of how we can see those supports in different content areas. But we're here. We are in the Department of Education of Early Childhood, Multilingual, and Special Education. Our UNLV Rebel Mail and our mail, it's in the website. So please reach out to us. We are eager to help, and we are eager to support emerging bilinguals and everyone that is interested in supporting their education and their families. And the video of this presentation will be at the Scholarship in Practice website in UNLV College of Education. Okay, thank you all for being here.